Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's webinar. As you come in, make sure and introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us your name and where you're joining us from. Also, make sure that in the chat you have it defaulted to everyone so we all can see your responses. Hi, Duncan. Welcome. Michigan. It looks like we've got Michigan in the house. Who else? Another Michigan. Hi, Aaron. Welcome. Tina. Hi, Tina. Go ahead and introduce myself too. South Carolina, Virginia. Hi, Chris, Jill. A lot of Michigan folks
Yeah.
on tonight. That's great.
How did they hear
Bruce.
from how did they hear about this? There's a lot of Michigan in there.
I know we do have one grant program with NCHE in Michigan, so that may be. But if you're joining from Michigan, let us know how you heard about the webinar. Hi, Annie. It's nice to see you. And Bruce, welcome from Florida. Epic Grant. Great. Well, again, thanks everyone for joining us tonight. My name is Dalton Savage. I am an education coordinator with the National Council for History Education. I'm joined by my colleague, Dr. Amy Allen, who is with Virginia Tech, and then also the Virginia Council for History Education. And then we have Chris Bunin with us from the Virginia Geographic Alliance, and Anita Palmer with us from GISect. Again, we're super excited to have you all join us tonight. This is part 3 of the 3-part series. Again, world conflicts to international cooperation, contextualizing episodes of 20th century US history with WebMaps. This is an interactive webinar, so please make sure if you have questions, place them in the Q&A, and then feel free to interact throughout the chat. But otherwise, again, just thank you so much for joining us, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chris and Anita.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Earlier this week, Anita and I were talking about how to start off today's session, and we thought the most important question to ask you is, what are you teaching right now in your classroom? So if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat box, what's the subject? What's the topic? What's the event you are currently in the throes of teaching right now as we get towards this last 6-week or 9-week push of school?
Mm.
Tariffs, yes. Okay.
World War II, that's germane with what we are covering.
All right, well, a number of World War
Nice.
II, industrialization to World War I, global connections. Well, thank you, immigration. Thank you all for sharing where you are with things. We just wanted to kind of get a pulse of where you are, so it would help inform us of what we share with you tonight. As Dalton said, this is part 3 of using WebGIS maps to contextualize episodes of 20th century. If you joined Anita and I for parts 1 and 2, the first 5 or 6 minutes are going to be a review for you. But if you're new, we want to make sure that we are able to introduce you to web maps, geographic information systems, and geographic inquiry. Um, as history teachers, we really do emphasize the temporal aspects of our content. Important to this and for us to be mindful of is how every event has both a temporal and spatial tag. In history, we usually know when something happens or happened with a high degree of certainty. However, that locational and where knowledge typically breaks down, and that's one of the reasons why Anita and I felt compelled to work with Dalton and Amy to host these webinars to share with you these ready-to-go classroom resources that will help you demonstrate and elevate the interplay of geography and history. The images in front of you on the right-hand side shows you trenches at Dien Bien Phu, the fall of French Indochina. The image themselves, they could be trenches along the Western Front or the Eastern Front of World War One. However, when I pulled out my GPS unit to show where I was standing, where I took the image, and I shared it with my students, they were more interested in where and why there. Why were trenches there at that point on the map? And I shared about French Indochina, the Battle of Dien Bien Phu, and the role that geography played in bringing the end of French's influence in that area, and also the beginning of the Vietnam War, if you're looking at it from the American perspective, or the American War, if you're looking at it from the Vietnamese perspective. But anyway, just these images are to really emphasize and contextualize the quote here that was shared by Dr. David Bodenhamer, one of the pioneers in historical GIS. This webinar series is being funded by a Virginia Geographic Alliance initiative known as hashtag USVA 250. And so the initial webinar was about the war before American independence, but then we realized that we can't just introduce you to the early American history ways of using GIS. Why not use the funding to help you learn how you can use these tools across the US history curriculum? But as we think about and as we are commemorating and reflecting on USVA 250, here are a few events that happened during 250 years ago in 1775 and 1776. But this week's a big week, particularly if you live in the Boston area. This Friday night, Boston will be commemorating Paul Revere's ride. And here is the schedule of events happening this weekend in Boston. Friday will be Paul Revere's ride, and then the 19th will commemorate the battles of Lexington and Concord. Being a geospatial enthusiast, I was really excited to see that they will be having a Harbor Walk drone show at 8:30 p.m. So just wanted to put a little shout out to the UAV audience out there. So I'm now going to hand it off to my colleague here, Anita, and she's going to introduce you to what exactly is GIS.
So GIS stands for Geographic Information Systems. So let's break it down real quick. The G in GIS is the geography part. The map is the vehicle where we can visualize the data. I is for information. And what we have so very much of these days is, the sheer amount of data that is constantly coming at us. The S is for system. Everything happens somewhere. And a GIS encompasses that locational data and processes it on a map. So a GIS is a computer system that analyzes and displays geographically referenced information. All right, so now let's talk about the map layers. Then many of you might have seen this little iconology, but the beauty of a GIS are the maps. And there are countless ways that, there's countless ways in which we can take a look at the data on a map. And a GIS are layers of data. So let's take a look at this and give this a, my brain is just totally synapsing here.
Anita, how do you typically explain to teachers the role of layers in a GIS map?
Well, exactly. So the what I love, and because I'm old and I just demonstrated that, think back about transparencies and overhead projectors. Anybody ever, use that in their classroom? Or actually had that used with them. And I used to love using it with my students, and they really enjoyed it. But a GIS is very much like that. It's each layer on that map, each in that GIS map is like a transparency and can have a different type of information on there. So it could be, the bottom layer could be a layer of streets. And then you might have fire hydrants would be the next layer. And the next layer after that are trees. And the next layer after that could be houses, etc. And you just go from there and you layer them all together, and then you get the holistic photo in your mind of what that place on Earth actually looks like. So the beauty of GIS is the fact that this is data has now become a map. It's all squished together and now becomes a map. So we'll just leave it that way. And then let's think about the geographic inquiry model. Geographic inquiry is used in business, education, truly across the realm. And when you first thing you do when you're looking at data is you ask a geographic question. You are like, I want to know something about something. So you want to ask that question about a topic or a place. And when we introduce a new subject, typically you do have a question. Then you go about acquiring what information is needed to answer that question. So you kind of think about, what am I going to have to look for? So you head on to the exploration part where you you explore the data and you turn the data into tables, databases, charts, and maps. Then after you've done that, you set about analyzing and using the power of the GIS technology to focus on relationships between the data you have gathered and explored. Why is it there? And so what? Why do we care? Then you want to act upon those data. It doesn't do us any good to create a map and nobody gets to see it or it's not shared, etc. It will not be useful unless you reach out and you share it with others. But I want to add one more thing that is not in this inquiry, and Chris will smile, but every time you are done analyzing and acting, chances are you're going to have some more questions. So it is a continuous loop. Back to you, Chris.
Yeah. And so as we share with you these resources today and you embark on using them in your classroom, consider your purpose. Are you teaching with GIS? Or are you using these resources to enhance your teaching and learning? Or are you teaching your students some aspects of geographic information systems? Probably early on, you'll mostly be teaching with GIS, but invariably they're going to be learning a lot about what a GIS is. And if you really like this technology and you take hold of it, you might find yourself wanting to teach more concepts of building historical GIS data sets and teaching students how to create those for their History Day projects or other projects and other classes. Um, what we're sharing with you tonight are a collection of tools to teach the 21st century U.S. history topics from a collection known as GeoInquiries that were produced by the Esri Software Company. The software we are sharing with you tonight is free to any K-12 school in the United States for free. You can get an organizational account for up to, I believe it's 10,000 users. It can vary depending on your license, but the goal is that Esri wants you to be using this technology with your students. When they provided this technology free to teachers, a lot of teachers received this technology, but then the question was like, now what do I do with it? And so they invested a good bit of time, energy, and financial resources to create a series of activities that would allow you to use this technology ideally seamlessly, and it plugs into your instruction using GIS. And you'll see that they created 10 collections. We're revealing 9 of them here. Everything from government to world geography, and each collection has at least 15 activities. They were designed by teachers and instructional specialists for teachers, and they align with a lot of the most common, at least in the social studies curriculum, the most common maps that you would find in a textbook. We're going to be linking you to some of these collection resources, but to let you know, when you link to one of the activities, here's what you get. You get a map, interactive, ready to go with professionally designed maps and layers. You get a teacher guide. You'll notice when we show you a guide, it's 2 pages. It follows the geographic inquiry model. It's 2 pages for a couple of reasons. One, Esri does update the resources as the software changes. So 2 pages keeps it modest when it comes to updates. But number two, Anita and I know very few teachers who follow scripts. So if you don't like the questions that are asked, or you think that you would go further and deeper using the maps, have at it. These are produced under Creative Commons license. You can modify the maps, you can modify the activity for you and your students. In addition, if you are a school that has computers that your students can work one-to-one, or you have a computer lab, a student worksheet is also provided, so you can assign them, give your students a chance to get lost, stumble and fumble around using the geographic information system maps. Then you can review it with them. So tonight we are going to be showing you the geo inquiries for the 20th century. And I got to tell you, the list is pretty long, and we're just going to hit some of the highlights. And David, I saw that you're currently teaching imperialism. So we're going to jump right in and show you from the World History Collection. Again, the nice thing about U.S. history, there might be some things hidden in the AP or Advanced Human Geography section. There might be some things hidden in the 4th and 5th grade collection on time zones. And there are a number of activities that align from the World History Collection. So we're going to go with an activity that Anita wrote back in the day on looking at Africa's bounty and borders. So give me just a moment to bring the activity up. So Anita, here we go. Here's Africa's bounties and borders. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All righty.
Okay. So we're looking at right now the Africa in 1914, the countries, European countries. So let's go from there. Go ahead and
You know what, Anita? I hate to pause.
yeah,
I think it would be better to show the audience how to get there. I know I preloaded it, but why
yeah.
don't we go ahead and give them a chance to just show them how to get to these activities?
Oh, good, good, good.
Yeah. So what I always do is I just quickly Google geo inquiries, and I notice that the first thing that pops up is Esri's landing page. And then what you're going to notice is once it loads, it brings you to this nice collection. And then you're going to see that you can connect by clicking on the World History tab. And then you'll see here are the 15 World History activities. And here we are looking at activity number 12. When you click there, you'll see here is the landing page for the activity with the map, the teacher guide, and the student worksheet with a few tips of how to get started. And then you can just click on the hyperlink. The teacher guide has the script. Just want to show it to you. So you can see here's your 2-pager. It aligns with the C3 standards, provides some outcomes, and then it walks you through the ask, acquire, and so forth, and gives you some step-by-step instructions. If you, as you work through this, we do recommend that you test drive it first, because sometimes the technology is being wonky that day, or something may have changed. But in addition, it just allows you to know where things are. And right here is the map link. So when I click on it, you'll see it's going to kick us out to the map that Anita is now going to walk us through.
Okay, there we go. All right, and you're going to notice on the left-hand side, there is a black, dark gray toolbar, and that's where Chris is going to be going back and forth as I'm directing him where we want to go. So right now, we're going to take a look at the map note that is placed in Germany. Let's take a look at that.
And before I click on that, we're just going to put in a little quiz question up there in the chat box. Can anybody believe what's behind map note number 1 in Germany tied to Africa's bounty and borders?
Ooh, look at you.
Only gonna give him 10 seconds. Alrighty, I'm not looking at the chat box, but now we're going to open it up.
All right. Cool. So now you want to scroll down so we can see that whole. There we go.
Yeah, so I can scroll down. You'll know this is a map note, and then I'm going to open up the map note.
Great. All right. So let's take a look at this. And what is our first inclination as to what these guys, there are 7 of them in total, what these guys represent? We see in French, Afrique, Africa, So, all right, let's give the students a little bit more basis here. So we have who do we think the guy with the knife is? Anybody have European nations carving up Africa? Very good, Bruce. So who do we think has the knife?
Kaiser Wilhelm, Bruce is on it.
All right. Sorry. Okay. There we go. All right. And how many pieces of cake are shown? There's 6. I'll just say that. But there's probably another third of the cake behind there. So there's 7, and they are doing what? They're carving up, as you said, they're each wanting a piece of the pie. All right. So now, as we yeah, when you think back on it, it is incredibly creepy. But let's go to bookmarks, and let's select Africa, the Africa bookmark, so that it's going to zoom out for us. And let's turn on, go to the layers, and let's turn on the different minerals in Africa. So here we have the minerals in Africa, metals, fuels, gems, etc. Let's look at, we'd want your students to maybe describe the distribution of the minerals. If you took a look there, and you'll see that, oh, there's clusters of perhaps oil and gas. We know what the little symbol probably means, but you can certainly do what Chris did, which was to click on those. So we're seeing precious metals, ferrous, non-ferrous, oil and gas, diamonds, gems, etc., radioactive elements. So we see that Africa certainly had many, a large distribution of minerals. So why would Europeans want resources from Africa? Thinking about, let's at least go back in our heads to what, 1850, 1860?
Pause, Anita. I got to tell you what I do when I teach this in my classroom. I was telling
Do
you
it.
this the other day. So, some of you mentioned that you're teaching industrialization. There's another geo inquiry called the First European Industrial Revolution.
Yep.
And so here's the geo inquiry for that. And so what I want you to notice is that when I'm going to turn on a layer here, and it's titled the Industrial Revolution Diffusion. So I just want you to watch this map diffuse in just a second. It's pretty cool. Some of these activities have an animated data set. So this shows you where the Industrial Revolution was in 1830. And I'm just going to push play. Then I push pause. And so I will bring this up when I'm teaching my students this. And I was just teaching or European imperialism in my AP Human Geography class just last week. So I brought inputs for your industrialization. You're going to need markets. And then we can talk about the cartoon, we can talk about this map, but we can really talk too about the relationship between this event and this geographic diffusion pattern and why these countries are the ones that are staking claim and building empires in Africa.
Absolutely.
Back to you, Anita.
And thank you, Chris. And that there's so much more discussion as to why Africa. How did they get away with it? Basically. But that's a whole other discussion. But the great part here is bringing in, as Chris said, all of these other pieces, and that really brings it alive for the students and gets them to really be saying, okay. So now let's go back to bookmarks and let's, sorry, no, let's not do that. Let's turn off the mineral layer and let's go look at Africa 1914.
It says 1914. Yep.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yep.
Now let's take a look here, and the legend is actually where I was trying to head here.
Okay,
So,
gotcha. Let me turn
okay.
that on.
And if we look at the legend, we see that, okay, what are the two countries in Europe that had the major stakes in Africa? I think we all probably know by looking at that and looking at the legend that it's France and Britain. And then also, let's take a look at, are there some countries that never were claimed by a European country?
Oh, sorry. Oh my gosh, I did what happened in your classroom. All I
Yeah.
do is click my bookmark and go back to Africa and I fix it.
All
So,
right, very cool. We planned that, folks. So anyway, and I just brought this one up because I wanted students to understand that every country, I mean, there were actually two countries that maintained their independence in Africa. So they can kind of begin to think about that and to explore that a little bit further as well. Yep, you got it. So, yep, Ethiopia or Abyssinia. And if we click on the other one,
help me find that one, Anita.
all the way to the
Oh, right here, right here, right here. Yeah, yeah, okay. Gotcha. Okay.
yeah, Liberia.
Okay.
And so they can get a little bit more information and they're about population, etc. All right. So the other, now let's go back and then let's turn on ethnic groups real quick. And do we think that there was purpose to the way, in other words, that they paid attention to not breaking up ethnic groups, et cetera, when land was segmented into these other areas? So we may want to zoom in just a mite and take a look, but I think we probably all know that, and you can turn the ethnic groups on and off just so that you can kind of get a sense of the country borders underneath it. So yeah, zoom in, sorry, not zoom in, turn ethnic groups on and off just a sec, once or
I
twice.
will.
Oh, sorry, let's go, instead of doing that, let's do Africa 1914. Let's try that one.
Okay. Do that. And
So,
do you want me to turn on the National Geographic map?
sure, we could do that
Okay.
as well. So that's current day boundaries, the 1914 ones. If you have the students turn layers on and off, they can get a sense of a comparison and seeing that truly the country borders did not take into any consideration into ethnic boundaries, ethnic groups being broken apart. And that's something that we see in other areas of the world as well, as we saw. Go for it, Chris.
So, Anita, what's going on with that map note there in Gambia? Let's
Well,
see. Why
let's
don't
go
we
take a
open that?
look,
Okay.
Chris.
So notice that in this activity, she put 4 different map notes on there. One we already saw Berlin conference. But this map note does a nice job of helping students understand the unique shape of Gambia. So go ahead, Anita.
Yep. And basically what the map notes do is they allow you, they aid the students into seeing why did some of these areas turn out to be so quirky. Zoom, and they can read this on the pop-up. Zoom out just very quickly, and I'm almost done with this one. If you go to the other map note in the south.
Yeah, one thing to note about Gambia that's interesting is that if you look at it, Gambia essentially divides up Senegal today. And
Mhm.
Senegal was a French colony and Gambia was a British colony. And the French offered the British the Ivory Coast in exchange for Gambia to kind of bring Senegal all together. And the British would not negotiate that. So yeah, she's right. There are a couple of other map notes because they do highlight some of the unique African country shapes that students may wonder why does it look that way. So here's one for Belgium Congo. And just Anita, since I taught this last week, I've
Yeah,
already,
go for it.
I know that
Please jump in.
that it just tells you how Belgium during the Berlin Conference negotiated to obtain this river basin to get access to the Atlantic Ocean. So that's why if you teach advanced geography, that's Belgian Congo is a corrupted state. And the other state that is interesting is this one here with this elongated corruption here. And this one was created due to the interests of Germany, hoping that this river the Zambezi River would head to the ocean. But as Anita put in the activity, oops, to get there would have required you to go over Victoria Falls, which was a 350-foot drop. So, yeah, Anita, is there other things with this one you think, or?
No, I think we just want our students to be thinking in terms of they can turn on that National Geographic map, which are current day boundaries, turn on and off and compare these historical layers that are really, really rich in information and data, and then, really come up with some other questions they might have. So that's it for this one.
The next GeoInquiry we want to highlight from this is going to be coming from the U.S. History Collection, and that is World War I. You'll see again, and we'll share with you a list of all the activities we've shared with you over the three-part series a little later tonight. But if you head to the U.S. History Collection, you're going to see there's a really good list of 20th century topics in the U.S. History Collection. So I want to quickly show you World War I. Again, you must remember these activities aren't trying to be inclusive of everything that happened in these topics, but they are trying to give you a sense to elevate the geography and the interplay between history and geography. And the goal is that you could use them in 15 minutes, or sometimes you end up in a conversation, you're there interacting with the map for a half hour or 45 minutes. So with this activity for World War I, when it opens up the map, it really brings up right away with a question asking students, what were the alliances in 1916? And typical to your maps you'd see in the textbook, they see that there are the Allied forces and the Central Powers. And then there are a number of bookmarks in this activity. And you can see that you can say, hey, I want to head down to World War I fronts. And this is going to be recorded, but I got to let you know, my dog is asking to go upstairs. So I'm going to let her upstairs real fast. Hold on one second. All right, my dog is on online fame forever now.
Yeah.
But what's nice is that with these bookmarks, I can zoom in on the World War I fronts, and then the activity asks the students to say, okay, well, what were the online fronts? And again, you're interacting with the technology, and you turn on the legend, and they can see that there are some major fronts and some secondary fronts. And if you click on either one of the lines, it shows you here's the Eastern Front. So if a student needs support, they can have it. And over here is the well-known stabilized Western Front from 1915 to 1917. And then here's the little-known front, the Italian Front. So what I like about this GIS activity is rather than just going right into let's talk about the Western Front, they quickly get to see that there were three major fronts. And then there's this dotted front here, which was the armistice line on November 11th, 1918. And I'm hoping that my students are wondering why November 11th, 1918, and maybe even seeing there's alignment with Veterans Day in the United States for November 11th. So then we can go back to our bookmarks and we can zoom in on the Western Front since most of our curriculum does focus on that. And right now the Western Front just shows a red line, a nice line that you'd see. But then with our layers, we can say, well, let's take a closer look at the Western Front. When we do that, we notice that there are different colors along the Western Front. And again, if we turn on our legend, so the students are having to see that the legend lines up, they can see that the Western Front had the long German line, but then on the eastern side of the Western Front, you have British, French, and Belgium troops lined up there. So that shows them that there were, here's your alliances, but here's also how the front wasn't just one monotonous line of military. It starts to bring that to light. The next piece to think about is how close was the Western Front to home? And so the activity has them turn on the capital cities, and they use the measure tool, and they are able to find out how close was the Western Front to Paris. Wasn't too far at all, not a long train ride at all. And in fact, reports are that Paris could hear the trench fighting and the artillery from the Western Front. Not too far from London, and not too far from, come on, from Brussels. So you can see, and then also you can see here's where Berlin is. So you can start to just, again, it's that idea that Anita shared with you. We're just turning on and off layers. And then we go and we zoom in here, and it ends with having the students look at Allied victories. So often we teach about how the United States jumped into World War I in 1917. And this is another animated layer. And this animated layer shows battles happening between May 28th, 1918 to November 12th, 1918. It's a period known as the 100 Days Offensive. And so what I typically do when I instruct this is I can have the kids watch it and they do it on their own, but then when I go through it with them, I want them to look at certain time periods and ask them, what do you notice about the patterns of the battles and where they're happening up to August of 1918? And what I want students to notice is that they're all happening east of the Western Front. And I explain how the 100 Days Offensive is when the soldiers left the trenches to move out and to try to end World War I. The goal was, can we end World War I in 100 days? And they noticed for the first 3 months, these battles are happening east of the line. But as we watch it, they'll notice that slowly some battles start to happen west of the line. If they'd like to know any information about those battles, all they have to do is click on the name of the battle, and it tells you the names of the battles. Let me play that one more time because there's a battle that I want to focus on that is really important in U.S. history, and I don't believe it gets as much attention as it should in U.S. history, given just the time that we have to teach World War I. So you notice there's this battle way over here, and that's the battle. And then there's also this battle right here. This is the Meuse-Argonne offensive. In U.S. history, it's the largest land offensive in U.S. history. Over 1 million troops participated in this battle. And it ended on November 11th, 1918. The reason it ended on November 11th is because the two sides agreed that the war would end on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. Quite an arbitrary date and a moment. But this is the Meuse-Argonne offensive. If you travel to any of these red dotted areas, you will visit French and British and American and German cemeteries all near them. So what I like about this activity is it brings to life those maps that we see in the textbook in a way that students may not understand it in any other way. So this is a nice way to do a nice review of World War I, to understand what was going on before the United States jumped in and supported, and then how they helped end World War I. So that is the activity on World War I. And then, Anita, I think one of the next big activities that people might cover would be the Dust Bowl.
Yep.
Okay. So let me just a second to. And Anita, just so you know, I'm looking at the clock. It's 8:10.
Yep.
So why don't we jump into the Dust Bowl?
I'm gonna go do kind of a quick flip through this.
Okay.
As he's pulling that map open, I want to read something to you. Well, okay, I'll wait this just a moment. All right. So on this map that we're looking at, it currently displays California and the Plain States, including Texas, which isn't typically what we would consider a plain state, but in any case, if you look at this, we want the students, we're looking at the legend. Dark green is the higher populations in 1930, and the students look and they say, where did the higher amounts of population, where were the population centers in these states and in California? And so we see that they are pretty much on the eastern side and then the Front Range of Colorado. So, Nebraska, excuse me, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas, and Kansas. Anyway, and then as I said, the Front Range. So as we come down, let's take, I want to read you just very quickly. In 1909, the USDA Bureau of Soils published in its Soils of the United States Bulletin that, in quotes, the soil is the one resource that cannot be exhausted, that cannot be used up. This idea was a very, very popular belief in the early years of the 20th century. All right, let's go see how well that worked out. On the, let's go turn on the layer percent of counties in farms in 1930. And then let's turn off the population layer. All right, so what is it that we are seeing now? Percent of counties and farms in 1930. The dark red is obviously, these are the percent of those counties in farms was in the red was over 85% of those were in farms, and you can read the rest of those or review the rest of those. So, all right, we get the idea. California, on the other hand, we have a couple of counties that are that high. And then, of course, we have some of those central, farming area that was a little bit higher, 65 to 80, well, 65 to 85%, still pretty high. So anyway, let's click on, let's turn off the percent of counties and then turn on precip, which you have done. And let's click.
Actually, Anita, I like keeping them layer on with the precepts. So students or teachers
Perfect.
can see the two playing together.
Absolutely. Sounds
Okay.
good. Click the rain cloud symbol for, let's start with Kansas real quick.
Now you're going to hit me on my geography. I hope I hit Kansas.
You got it. I know, right? And I was, yeah, you got it. All right. What is this looking like? Starting in 1930, 1931, looks like they were still above annual average, precip. But then what does the rest of the 10, 11 years look like? All under the average precip. Problematic. If we clicked another state, what would we see? Here's Oklahoma. Same thing. So we've got that 11 years, 12 years, then we go ahead and click on Texas.
Yeah, we want to highlight Texas in this one for you. So
absolutely. So why, it's like, oh, well, Texas isn't so bad, or it's not as bad, but let's think about Texas, right? The size of Texas and the difference in the, the environmental zones in Texas are way different than the states north. And so probably we could talk about averages now with our students, in that, that is why we're seeing the average precip was a little bit higher for Texas. So, all right. And
want me to turn off the clouds?
Yep, turn off the clouds. And then let's turn on the dust.
Oh, turn on the dust. Okay. That's up top. Okay. Want me to click on the map node?
Yes. Just go ahead and click on that guy. And then let's take a look. So students, I'm not sure, understand the sheer enormity of the dust clouds. If you look at that, that's a a two-story farmhouse, and it's probably, that dust cloud is probably at least 3 times the size of a two-story farmhouse there. That is tremendous for the students to think about the implications of that much dust. And this wasn't on one day. This was this was an event that lasted over weeks and months. So what do the students think? Do you think people stayed around, or do you think they left, or what have you? Think they decided to wait it out? We don't really need to answer that, but we need students to be thinking about that. All right, so now let's go in. You can turn off the dust if you'd like, and turn on the growth in the number of farms. We're going to just do it very quickly. Let's take a look. And we do need that legend. Yes. So this is possibly counterintuitive, but we want the students to be thinking like this. So if you look in the legend, it says less than 100% is a reduction in farms. So our reduction, our big dark gray and dark orange, 80 up to 89% reduction in farms. And yep. And then let's take a look at that. And so let's go scroll up on that just very quickly. Look here in that particular county, the farms in 1930 were 1,454 farms in that county. By 1940, they'd lost about 410 farms. Now scroll down to the pop graph, and you'll see the decrease in population. And
Anita,
so
I hate to interrupt you,
no,
but I
go.
want to. So one thing I love about this, and I hope that you all, I mean, I just look at this, and this is why I actually adore using this technology in my classroom. Think about all that we're exposing to our kids implicitly, that we are asking them to interact with maps. This is an interesting inverse coloration map. So
Mhm.
what we think would be more is actually less, but we're showing the areas that
Yeah.
saw the most people leave. Anita has shown us a primary source to look at with the Dust Bowl. We've looked at precipitation graphs. We're now looking at census records, and some kids might be just ask you right away, what's the census and why is it 1920, 1930? Now you have an indirect conversation about, or a natural conversation about, why do we take the census every 10 years? Who knows where this goes? And then we take that same data and we parlay it into a bar graph. This, folks, is information science that we're able to put in front of the kids in a very seamless, natural way. And it really helps kids who like math connect with a subject that they might not like so much. And it also welcomes kids into information science who may be more of a social scientist brain. So
Mhm.
just thanks for letting me get on my soapbox there, but I do
Good.
just love to show and just highlight how dynamic these maps really are.
Yeah, this is why I love doing these with Chris. It's just like multi-dimensional. And we're going to finish up with a 1-2 punch here. Let's go ahead and turn off this layer, turn on the percent population change from 30 to 40. All right, quick question. Where did these people go? All right, now turn on the cities, the USA major cities, and let's see if we think that Dust Bowl colored where folks ended up in today's world. And so this, I would spend more time on the population, but we're running a little slim. So I just wanted you to see that the students can then get a sense that this major geographical, concept really caused, there is causation here as to where people ended up, certainly in these states, but also in California and probably a couple of other states. And I'll just throw in there, I told Chris about, I don't know, in the last 5-6 months, I just finished Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath again, and which I'm sure your students may be reading parts of that or have. And boy, was it very pressing. It is just an amazing, amazing connection for me. Go ahead, Chris.
Great. I'm gonna help wrap things up. We're just trying to be mindful of our time with you. We
Yep.
could go on for another hour, but we know that we don't want to do that. But I did want to show you the list in the U.S. history collection. So I saw that many of you are teaching World War II, some of you are teaching Cold War, some of you were reviewing. And I encourage you to look at all these different activities that are ready for you. I'm going to share with you in a moment Operation Overlord, D-Day, but notice there's a great one on the hotspots in the Cold War, one that looks at Japanese American internment, historically Black community erasure and redlining, so you can look and get an idea of what fits for you and how you're wrapping up your year. And so I just want to make sure you see the list here. But let me go back to the collection. And I want to quickly show some of you that are studying or teaching War II right now,
Yeah.
just real quickly, what's sitting in the Operation Overlord activity. So the Operation Overlord activity, it's dynamic, similar to the Dust Bowl that Anita shared. So it starts off with students seeing the German occupation in 1944 and asking the question of where, who controlled what in May of 1944. It then has students explore the Atlantic Wall that Hitler built. And with that, you'll see that there are some map notes. And all you have to do is you have to click on the bookmarks to activate the map notes. Oh, hold on, let me. So I zoom in on Calais. And at here, you see a map note near Calais. And when I click on this map note, it brings up a picture. It first explains what the Atlantic Wall was. Then it has students look at this cannon or this artillery gun that was built on the Atlantic Wall to see what were the fortifications that the Allied forces were up against. I personally often use this to complement other instruction that I'm having. So I know there's so many ways to approach D-Day. So I like to teach the different elements of D-Day, but also have kids to understand geographically what were we looking at here. You then can click out to the region and you can ask students why many people predicted that the D-Day invasion would occur near Calais, and they can see that it was a narrower strait. And then you can go back to your layers and you show the students the D-Day locations. And this shows you where naval and air was occurring. You can then turn on the invasion region, and they can see from this that they can start to see from the legend uh, which countries were involved. So they see that it was not just Great Britain and the United States, but also Canada was involved, and they can see if they click on each layer what was going on and where they were heading and what beach they were heading to. You can then turn on the landing areas. And then you can see as you zoom in to each of the landing areas, you can click on each beach and it will tell you the estimated casualties that occurred at each beach. You can click on the map note here that shows you what the D-Day landing looked like at the end of the day, and have students analyze this very dynamic image from the U.S. National Archives. And then, again, I know we're moving pretty fast. If I zoom out and I turn on after D-Day, and I push play, it starts to show you how D-Day was just the beginning of the liberation of Europe and France. So it really shows the students how much time went by to reach the edge of France and Germany. So again, I usually push play on this to ask them how much time has gone by till after that invasion. Territory is becoming part of the Allied forces and not part of the Axis powers. So that's a quick overview of how you might use this to contextualize the geography of D-Day. And then finally, I do want to finish up with, just because we need to align with our title, that the 20th century experienced a lot of conflict, but then the second half of the 20th century, we've seen a lot of cooperation. And that activity comes from the World History Collection. There's a nice activity that I know that many of the history collection wants you to learn about. What are the different regional and international cooperations that exist in the world today? So if you click on Geo Inquiry number 15 from the World History Collection, it has students work through the activity to learn first about what was going on at the end of World War II, how was Germany divided, and which countries managed Germany. It also allows students to zoom in and see the geographic context of Berlin being surrounded by West Germany. And we can zoom out to Germany, a number of different map notes. This one brings up the different alliances that were created during the Cold War, NATO and Warsaw Pact. This here discusses the Schengen Agreement that was created as a precursor to the European Union. And then you can see that the students can turn on different alliances, such as Cold War Europe. And this shows you the different alliances and the government types for Western Europe. So it shows you, are they a NATO member, a Warsaw Pact member, or another country? You can then show the geography of the UN. And this is an animated layer that shows how the United Nations has grown over time. So you can ask students to answer questions about how has the United Nations grown over the years. Go back to the legend, or the layers, sorry. You'll notice there's a map note in New York that helps give the history of the United Nations being created. And then what I really like is that when we get into different alliances, we can say, well, what is the European Union? And it shows in the legend when countries join the UN. Additionally, as we work our way through the layers, we can then highlight OPEC and what is OPEC and what kind of a supranational organization is it. And then we can show all the different trade blocs that exist around the world today to show that while often we think of international cooperation as international and global with 200 plus countries, there's a lot of regional work going on around the world too, and see a lot of the different economic cooperations that are occurring. So as you get to that last week or two of covering so much stuff, I really think this geo inquiry helps you check a lot of boxes quite quickly and allows students to see how globalization is very scalable and is very relative to the region you're talking about. So right now, as we get ready to conclude things with this three-part series, what Anita and I would like for you to think about is, in your work, when do these themes of geography matter? Location, distance, direction, the concept of neighborhood, region, territory, or sometimes I'll say to students, the idea of turf. What about that scalability, teaching local, regional, national, or global connections? It's for these reasons that Anita and I believe that and recommend to you that you really need to give these geo inquiries a try, because we really hope that they will make your life as a teacher more efficient and effective.
Thank you.
We Cool.
Oh, go ahead.
And I was going to say, while you manage the questions, Dalton, I'm going to quickly pull up the document with all the geo inquiries Anita and I have shared, and we'll put it in the chat box and also share it with you.
Great, thank you. If you all have questions, right, you can place them down in the comments or in the Q&A. I do want to say just thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Amy, and everybody for being here. I do want to give just a second to remind everyone that we do have a survey associated with this webinar, just for feedback for us and for Chris and for Anita. If you could, I'm going to put it in the chat now, and then it will also be in the, as you exit, it'll pop up. We do have 3 additional webinars happening this month with NCHE, all free and available for you. We actually have one on Wednesday, Making Time for the Social Studies in the Elementary Classroom. I'm going to go ahead and place that in the chat. We have one on AI in the social studies education. That one is coming up this Thursday. I'm going to place that in the chat. And then we have one later on in April with Imperial Material, National Symbols, and the U.S. Colonial Empire. And I am going to place that one in the chat there for you. It looks like we do have one question asking, can we create our own task within the geo inquiries?
Absolutely. These are Creative Commons resources. So if you would like to design your own activity, you can. If you get a free ArcGIS Online organizational account, you can save a copy of the geo inquiry map, and you can change it. You can add layers. Anita and I were talking about how if we were to modify this activity, we could bring in that animated layer of the Industrial Revolution and just have it as part of the map. Those types of skills, though, are a level 2 type thing, just to learn how to save and modify maps. And so we wanted to make sure that for this, you realize no experience is needed. It's grab it and go. But yes, you can absolutely do that.
Mhm.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah, Bruce, thank you. Impressed to find the resources that are so important and a better resource for his students. So great. And then, yeah, Chris dropped in the document with the geo inquiry hyperlinked for the U.S. history by era on there as well. I don't see, okay. How do you access the students' growth potential from these exercises?
So there are a few ways that I do that in the classroom. One thing I notice is growth is just how comfortable they become answering the more analytical questions, how comfortable they become working with the GIS maps. And a few of the maps have some advanced tools like how to filter out data. So for instance, show me all the battles that happened before a date or after a date, and the maps bounce around. What happens in a lot of my history classes is we're using this tool for National History Day and for science fair projects. And so some students will move on and create their own GIS maps. And therefore, I mean, I know GIS quite well. I teach it as a standalone course, but we're able to let students do historical and humanities GIS with it as well. So I typically see it as like giving them a worksheet where they're working with a map as you would in a textbook. Where I really assess them as how comfortable are you becoming with the technology. I typically set a timer, and after 10 or 15 minutes, I'll push pause, because some students, it takes a little longer to grasp the technology. Some zip along and they are really good with the technology. And it just also, I'm very mindful of just how much content we have to cover in our history classes. Anita, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, just one thing. I don't know if they noticed, even though I think you said there's the student worksheets.
Right.
So those student worksheets do not have the answers on those. And so you will be able to, assess their baseline, their basic understanding of the information and the data. And then on the teacher materials, you have the answers. So that will be helpful as well.
Yeah. And thank you, Annie. I noticed your comment there. Students in middle to upper elementary really get a kick out of using these maps and learning how to use them. It is not above them. I mean, as you can see, you think of young kids with smartphones, right? And iPads. They will pick this up faster than we will. And it's just, to quote one of our favorite GIS mentors, Charlie Fitzpatrick, the best way to approach this is to keep your knees bent and just have fun.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you again. If there aren't any other questions, I guess we'll close out for tonight. I just want to say again, thank you, Chris. Thank you, Anita. Thank you, Amy, for being here, and for all the participants. Really enjoyed this series. And then the recordings will be posted too, so you're able to access those later. But I hope everyone has a great rest of their night and a great rest of their week. Thank you.
Thank you all
Thank
for
you,
all you're
Dalton.
doing.